the Circle Cinema. We're pleased to have Mr. Bob J. White of Broken Arrow. He was a captain of the Army Air Force and attached to the 12th Troop Carrier Squadron. Morning, Mr. White. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
If you would just tell us your story.
Well, it started back in December the 7th, 1941. I was a high school senior in Cushing, Oklahoma, and I was going down to operate my dad's service station that day. It was on Sunday, and so he could go to church, and so I went down to the station and turned on the radio, and at 8 o'clock I heard this announcement come over that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And I called my dad, and he hadn't left for church, and I told him. And so then the National Guard, which they had a unit in Cushing, Oklahoma, they started calling them to come to active duty to Fort Lawton, Fort Sill, to report. So they started coming into the station to gas up their cars to go down to Lawton to start going into the Army, active duty.
Did they call them that Sunday?
They started calling them immediately as soon as they could, as soon as they could get a hold of them, and basically the commander. And he had to get a hold of the troops and call all those guys that are in the National Guard in that unit, which was a 120th Medical Detachment. But so then I was there at the station, and I knew then that eventually I would be drafted if I didn't do something else. I didn't want to be drafted. I didn't want to go to the infantry or the army, or the artillery. So at that time, they had opened it up to high school graduates for the Air Corps to go through cadets. So I went to California and worked in a bomber plant, Consolidated Aircraft, for a little while, but then I knew that they were getting close to getting me. So I went down to San Diego and enlisted in the Army Air Corps to go through cadets, the pilot training. So then I came back to Cushing and helped my dad in the service station. I was called up to active duty to report to February 1943. So then I went through cadets. I went through Santa Maria, California, La Junta, Colorado, and graduated La Junta. That's where I left, and we were put on an overseas alert that very day. So I went home 3 days, and then had to come back to La Junta, report back, because we were going to be shipped out to Newport News, Virginia, where we were shipped out there 2 weeks on a USS Cristobal, a boat, to Naples, Italy. And we went into Naples, and they went to Caserta, which was the replacement depot. And while we were there, they came over and picked us up from Brindisi. The C47 Group, Troop Carrier Group, needed some pilots. So they picked us up and took us back to Brindisi, Italy, and they trained us there. Because I didn't have any training in a military aircraft except what was going through flight school. So they trained us there at Brindisi, and then we were co-pilots, and then later on I became a pilot, and we're flying missions in the Yugoslavia and Albania and Greece at night, and supporting Marshal Tito and the partisans. So that's what we did, and we would leave at night and try to get back before daylight. And sometimes we would drop supplies, different things to Marshal Tito, and other times we would land behind enemy lines in the mountains and take in mules or howitzers or mines or other types of things that you couldn't drop. And we would land in there, and then we would bring women and children back to Bari, Italy for safety. So that's what we did. And many times when we were flying over one particular area called the Split, there was a lot of aircraft fire, and you had to take evasive action because they were really trying to knock us down. And then they knew we were over there. So the things that happened, but we did what we did by doing what we did with Marshal Tito. We kept 4 divisions of Germans tied up in Yugoslavia, Albania, and Greece, so they couldn't go back to France or the Italian front. So Marshal Tito kept them tied up. They would go out and harass these Germans they'd blow up a railroad trestle. Then they'd go plant mines all around that railroad track so it was damaged, so when they came in to work on it, they'd get into mines. So they just harassed them terrifically and kept them tied up down in those areas. But we supported him with all the supplies that he needed, and the mules, like I said, I took in mules or a big gun or whatever he needed to help him fight the Germans. And we did that all that time. And when we weren't doing that, we were flying up on the 5th Army front and picking up the wounded and bringing them back to Naples or Rome. We'd have a flight nurse aboard, and she would take care of them. And these were the most severely wounded that needed hospital care. So we did that too. So these were the things, and we dropped paratroops in southern France and also in Greece. So we also dropped paratroops at times. But I flew 44 missions. I landed behind the enemy lines in the mountains 12 times. And you could see tracers coming over you as the Germans were trying to shoot at us.
How did that make you feel?
Well, it didn't make me feel very good because I knew that they were trying to knock us down. And one of the other things that happened that was quite a coincidence was one of the other pilots from the 28th Squadron, which was based at Brindisi, Italy too, was over there and going to land, but there's a big Russian C47 came on with a big red star, and he turned on his landing lights and just illuminated everything, because we didn't use landing lights. We just flew out where we could land on the flare path, and didn't use landing lights because we didn't need them. We knew what to do, but they didn't. So they come in and turn on the landing lights, and this German aircraft was up there circling looking for them. They knew we were over there. They could hear our engines, knew we were coming in there. They had all kinds of reports. So anyway, this friend of mine from the 28th Squadron, Pinckney Largent, was going in there and with his plane, and they had a load of mines. So they shot this plane and that started going off. The mine started going off. How he got out of the plane, I'll never know, but he got his front pack chute on and got out. And of course, he was on at 700 feet. So when he hit the ground, the hardens came on, his chute was on fire, and they put that out, and they took care of him. And he had on one of these green flight jackets, and that thing was just sprinkled with molten metal, just brown holes all over where that metal had blown up and hit him. So anyway, about 2 weeks later, somebody flew in there into that Yugoslavia and picked him up and brought him back to Bari, Italy. And that's where I was. And I was at Bari, Italy that day, and I picked him up and took him back to Brindisi to his squadron. But when we landed behind him in lines, we would bring out women and children. And one plane had 68 women and children on it, even all this full. We'd bring them back to Bari, Italy for safety, so that they didn't have to stay over there with the Germans or be under all that fighting. So anyway, I took Pinckney back to Brindisi to his squadron. And then after the war, I came home and went to school at Oklahoma A&M College. And while there, I was working a summer job down south of Chickasha and driving on 1937 Plymouth. And I was a retail credit investigator, investigating people's credit, and I'd go to banks and things. So here's a guy, thumbnail ride, student, going home someplace. So I pulled over to pick him up. And it was Pinckney Largent, the same guy I'd picked up in Bari, Italy, and taken back to Brindisi. And this was in 1946. So anyway, I took him down as far as I was going, let him out, and I didn't recognize him until I got in the car. But then we visited a little bit, and he was going to school at OU to be an attorney. So he did graduate, and I graduated, and then I went back to Fairfax, Oklahoma. But I got called up after a year during the Korean War. So I was in for another 24 months. But the other day I heard that he had become a judge. He had gotten his law degree, become a judge. I got a phone, and I went and got the phone, and I got his phone number and called him. And I said, "Hey, Pinckney, this is Bob White. How would you like a ride?" And he was really surprised to hear. This was 50 years later.
Sure.
So anyway, I was 20 years old, and single, so it was, but we had a job to do, and we did it. And so I'm proud of what I did, and, helped take care of those people. And So that's part of my story, and I enjoy telling it to people because I think they need to know what was done over there. A lot of people don't know this.
Right.
You know, they have no idea what some of the people were doing.
Well, you probably saved a lot of lives.
We did save a lot of lives. We saved a lot of lives. And also bring those wounded back to Rome or Naples to the hospitals, you know, for the care they needed. So we did a lot of things during the war, you know, but I flew 44 missions, landed 12 times in those mountains, and I was glad to get home.
Bet you were. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, this is the uniform we had during the Korean War, the U.S. Air Force. Of course, these are my medals, my wings, and I was a second lieutenant when I graduated from Lahaina, and then I was made promoted to first lieutenant, and in 1956 I was promoted to captain. I was still in the reserves, and so anyway, these are the medals that we were awarded for what we did in over in Yugoslavia in the European area. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, thank you.